Hello and welcome to our Science T-Level bite-sized recording on academic reading and writing in the science sector. So just to begin with, would like to pop a disclaimer in here. All information provided is correct as of recording of April 23 and may not reflect future changes to guidance documents. Please always review the most up-to-date guidance. So my name is Tracy and I'm joined by Marina. We are the Provider Development Officers with NCFE. We're here to support providers on CPD through events such as webinars, workshops, face-to-face, and resources such as bite-sized recordings like this. I come from teaching in FE, teaching health and social care. So my role has been really exploring strategies for teaching and delivery that can support CPD for our teachers of the health and science T-level.
And I'm Marina, so I am also Provider Development Officer. My background is science, so I have a PhD in neuroscience where I utilize, elements of physics, chemistry, and of course biology to solve various problems. So my teaching experience comes from a science and maths background, so I'm really used to applying those difficult concepts and also developing our well-rounded students. So the aim of this recording is to support you in developing the academic skills in your students so that they can succeed and excel in the science discipline. By the end of the session, we hope that you'll be able to evaluate the academic skills required for employment or high-level study, consider strategies to support your students' academic skills, their communication skills, their thinking skills, and analyse the reading, writing, speaking and listening skills required for maximum success in the specialist areas. So through this, we're going to follow Fatima. Fatima is a T-level student in science. She is interested in chemistry and wants a career in a laboratory. So where she is now, she is just starting the T-level. She has some experience with exams from doing her GCSEs, but she's limited in that critical thinking skills and in experience of other types of assessment. She also has limited engagement with employers and those professional communications. So knowing this, what we know about Fatima, what do we need to develop in her in order to allow her to succeed in the T-level? What we've highlighted here are those professional skills, the critical analysis, problem solving, summation and synthesis. So problem solving, summation and synthesis are quite key in the assessments. So she will encounter assessments she's not familiar with, like the occupational specialism assignments, the employer set project. And this is where she will have to use information from that she's learned from across her T-level, including skills, knowledge and behaviours, bring that together and use that to critically problem solve. This is a key thing we'd want to develop in that to enable her to succeed. Additionally, we have communication. So different types of communication depending on the audience. Are you communicating with a client? Are you communicating with a peer, a superior? What's the background of your audience? All this are things we'd want to develop in Fatima. Then looking further, she wants to go and work in a laboratory. So what does her employer want from her? So here's just an example from the University of Cambridge. They highlight to be a research laboratory technician in chemistry. She requires team working, confidence setting up and maintaining laboratory equipment, organizational skills, communication, including delivering training, which is a very interesting one, and technical knowledge. With regards to the academic skills we want to develop in Fatima, what can we do to help enhance these? So we need to enhance, we've identified her written and verbal communication, her independent learning, problem solving, and critical thinking.
So let's explore developing academic skills, beginning with written communication. So this is a key area for focus, as in previous exam series, students have struggled in the written communication components of the ESP and the exams. So continuous formative assessment in this area will prepare students for these assessments, for synoptic assessments in the future, and even future progression. So first of all, looking at sort of essays and report structure. What do the students know? What do they need to do? And what do they need to do to improve? Written work is being able to link, justify, evaluate. It's not just about sort of splitting bits of information. It's exploring effective proofreading and proofreading under time constraints as well, effectively. Checking for spelling and grammar errors is also a key component. It's also about improving our students' ability to time manage this, and critical to understanding planning essays and effective time management processes. So writing it, proofreading it, balancing arguments, balancing evaluations. This is not just as useful for T-levels as mentioned earlier. This is going to be a really key component as a scientist, this writing effectively to target dates, target times, both in HE and in the future careers. Also looking at how to communicate to different audiences. So who is it for? What's the level of technical language? So if it's to a peer, they would probably keep their technical language really high. But if it's not to a peer, maybe it's to a client who technical level shouldn't be presumed, then how are they going to make sure that they convey the same information without being patronizing and being very clear and descriptive? It's also looking at how do they present information professionally. It's about going beyond just that aesthetics. We know students really love to make sure they're using the perfect font, the perfect design, but actually it's about quality and what is on there. So what is the content? Is that information very clear? And less time making sure it looks very pretty. Because something looking very pretty and aesthetically pleasing does not necessarily mean it's professionally effective either. It's also really important in highlighting really effective use of referencing. So students need to really focus on how to support analysis, justification, and how to reference correctly. This is a really key developmental area from previous exam series. Now exploring verbal communication. So what we want to do in regards to verbal communication is find different ways to sort of foster that skill. So this can be done through simulated practical sessions. This is a really good way for students in different clinical examples evidence how they would professionally introduce themselves, how different scientists communicate with peers, and how they communicate between different departments. It's going beyond just active listening. It's about that effective body language, that professional manners. Again, this may vary from different cultures, so it's being aware of these cultural differences as well and being respectful of that. Also, another key area is incorporating group discussions. This is about learning how to manage group discussions effectively, how to discuss key areas that they might disagree on effectively, being able to listen to each other. And this will be really important in their future careers when they're working with lots of different communications. So now we're going to move on to how to be an independent learner. So through STEM learning, there's a really good CPT resource on metacognition. So developing those metacognitive skills. In simple terms, this is about students being able to monitor, direct and review their own learning. So really build on that sort of independent learning skills, how to sort of self-regulate and understand their own learning. Using different skills such as exam wrappers, personal learning checklists. The students need to be able to identify their own individual areas of strengths, weaknesses to guide further study, reflect on the adequacy of their preparation time, the appropriateness of study strategies, and characterize the nature of errors to find any recurring patterns that could be redressed. Next, we want to build those critical thinking skills, and we're going to explore problem-based learning. So research has shown that learners really need to engage in those higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. They need to be really shifting into that inquiry-based learning, into that real-world application, which is what T-Levels is all about. It's about really applying that knowledge and skills in the real world. Higher order thinking skills, those are that sort of top 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy are problem solving, generalizing, and critical thinking. Group discussions such as group activities such as discussions, cooperative learning, peer tutoring, these all effectively develop higher order thinking skills. And there has been really strong evidence supporting that correlation between problem-based learning and acquisition of those higher order thinking skills. So let's have a look at the problem-based learning cycle in a bit more detail. So first of all, you put your students into groups. You will assign roles to the students as step 1. Okay, you may want to swap them around in future. So first time you'll have maybe that strong communicator as group leader, and then you swap that around in future to build on those skills of maybe any students that are maybe a little bit weaker on that verbal communication, those leadership skills. You'd also have timekeeper, note taker, etc. You would present a problem as stimulus material to the students. You could use stimulus material from sample assessment materials that we have on our website. You get students to identify what the key problem is, key question is. This is around standing operating procedures, risks, etc. Get them to mind map ideas around that. What knowledge do they already have, what they already know in that moment that applies to that? Just brain dumping that knowledge almost. They then have independent study to maybe review this further, any gaps on the knowledge, anything that they weren't able to answer, anything they weren't able to apply. And they would come back together for a second meeting to share what they have found, what evidence they have found, or what extra knowledge that is relevant needs to be shared. In this second meeting, this is when they really whittle down that key problem and they actually come up with a solution or to a process. They present this solution. So this is really up to you what formative assessment strategy you might want them to do to present this solution. This could be in groups, independently, it could be through presentation, essays, reports. Align it with the synoptic assessment sort of assessment methodology. And then there's peer discussions and feedback and reflection as well as another really key component of this process, being to highlight what they did well and what they need to change. So not just their knowledge, but around that whole process, what worked well, like did the group dynamics not work? Did they not communicate more? Did they not talk more? Did they not speak as much as they should have? So really building those metacognitive skills as well.
Another area that was highlighted was critical thinking. So how do we go about teaching critical thinking to our students, particularly in that laboratory science context? So I want to share this paper shown below, which showed an effective technique in developing the critical thinking skills of their lab science students. So what they did was they instructed students to make decisions based on quantitative data comparisons during lab experiments and then apply these in real time. So they were training students to stop, you've got some quantitative data, quickly do some comparisons, right, would you make any changes now, apply it in real time. And they found that these cycles of decisions, as depicted in this diagram, lead to students making improvements to their experiment without instructions. So they found that students were later going on and autonomously making improvements to their experiment, but also they were able to state the limitations of their experimentation. So this idea of getting students to make decisions and act on them in real time was able to foster autonomous critical thinking. But now looking into, so we have critical thinking in the lab, but then that goes as well to the literature. So when your students have located some relevant literature to support as evidence to support their practice, they need to critically appraise this evidence. So there's many different types of study designs which would affect how you would appraise individual studies and the weight you therefore give each one. So commonly represented in what's known as the level of evidence hierarchy, as shown here. So you consider this, looking at our different, we're starting from expert opinion to case controlled studies, they then have randomized controlled studies, and then we start getting to reviews, higher levels. So looking at this and your students' confidence, where would you say they sit on this hierarchy? Obviously, we're talking about these are level 3 students that we're slowly working up, but it's interesting, some students actually prefer reading things like reviews because there's some analysis already in there, as opposed to just reading that core literature. Now looking at sharing and using research in the classroom. So I want to share with you this table. So this is from a study done on undergraduate science students. It analysed their laboratory reports for how they used literature and the evidence they had in literature. So in this study, they found a significant positive correlation between the grade awarded and the use of references, as well as the evidence from experiments and the length of report. So this table shows the levels of evidence that the study found, including examples here from student work. We can see this as a hierarchy of reference to the literature, as shown here on the right. Now, where this is a high level, being undergraduate students, but we can begin to foster these in our students now in the T level, in Fatima in the T level. So where would you say your students are on this scale with regard to using research in their work? And what's the next step above for them and designing activities to enable to foster this? Now looking back to Fatima, 10 years later, she successfully completed the T level and she is a senior chemistry research technician. So here are the skills that she uses in her day-to-day. You see communication as highlighted both within and across teams of different departments. Documentation with a real focus on that clear written communication and accuracy of documentation. Using evidence-based techniques and keeping up to date on advances in the literature. Again, we have that justification and that comfortable nature with different types of literature. Quality assurance. We have data acquisition, maintenance of equipment, which we know features quite highly in the laboratory sciences occupational specialism of the T level. Being safety conscious with good numerical skills, problem solving and critical thinking, and ability to accurately follow SOPs. Well, this journey of Fatima is useful for us as practitioners to help foster these skills and develop these skills in our students. This could also be a useful thing to share with your students so they can see how the skills they're learning now in the T level are not just to help them with the T level or with their interview or the university. This is also to help them. These are skills that they will use in their day-to-day, in their career and stepping forward. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing about Fatima's experience and sharing the techniques we have. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.